we now have James Gillick, and we now have a variety of different heights of nectar, depending on how tall you're feeling. But for those who don't know, James is an artist, is one of our best known Catholic artists, and I'll leave the rest to him.
Joseph is partly right. In my own home, I'm incredibly famous. When I come down the stairs in the morning, everybody knows my name.
Yep.
I have my talk here. But outside of our front door, most things about me are unknown, except that I'm a painter serving a small circle of the commercial and professional class who have funded the arts in Europe since the 16th century, namely those who manage the affairs of the billionaire ruling class. My clients are very hidden, very talented, energetic people. I'm very fond of them, and I am their clown, a man who adds no weight to their burden of responsibilities. I am a professional nobody. Because I am a weightless thing, I eat at their tables and I drink tea with them. They give me insights to share that are hard to come by. That is me. Much more important than this is, who do I think I am talking to? Who are you? Well, you're trouble, aren't you? You're definitely trouble. You take serious things seriously. You're very exacting of yourselves, and you expect those around you to try their hardest. You go to confession a lot. Though you respect it, you don't seem to be afraid of rank or status. You grade courage above most virtues. You're intense. You're idealistic. You seem to me to be fixed on finding your way to a destination that the world you walk in simply cannot see. You seem to be trying to decipher something that you consider yourself to be in receipt of, not to have generated yourselves. You are very particular about things that others dismiss as being of no consequence. You have little top-down patronage. Even the thought of you thinking about what you think about gets under the skin of people who don't have time to think about what you think about. You're a new thing, reiterating something uncompromising, simple, and ancient. You're an irritant, and you're trouble. Happily, all of those issues are some of the very distinct characteristics of sainthood, as it has appeared throughout salvation history. Since the millennium hove over the horizon into view, the whole church has been earnestly praying for a new dawn, a new evangelization, a second spring. We are now halfway through Christ's hidden years. In 5 years will be the wedding at Cana. In 8 years will be his triduum. But somehow, in praying for this second spring, the church convinced itself that the Holy Spirit, he who moved over the morass of our unformed universe and drew an order from the sea of its component parts with an irreducible exactitude, would somehow produce a new type of saint who is mostly just fuzzy and amenable and comfortable. But saints aren't usually like that. Saints bring a type of martyrdom. They bring a type of martyrdom to the rest of the church because basically saints are almost impossible to live with. You are certainly one lovely facet of this second spring, and in this room and in your company, I identify as a martyr. I am delighted to be here today to serve you. I am talking to you today because the journey you are on is a graceful journey towards more grace. Inevitably, you will be taken very deeply into both the substructure of this enigmatic universe and into the mantle of made things that the Holy Spirit drew over it as it was created. The cloak of God-made things is called the cosmos. Cloak is what cosmos means. Just as inevitably you will be prompted to make manifest what you see of God. Most of you are already deeply interested in culture and the arts. Some of you commission work. Some of you hunger to do so. Some of you have been doing so for a very long time. Rather than talk about your journey towards mystery, which is essentially personal and unique, I am going to now set your course with a sensible pigeon step. Put the right art in front of the right people. Over my working life, I have compiled a dozen or so pragmatic maxims that summarize how art has been brought into the world successfully for the longest time. This step is as good a place to start as any. I tend to talk like an artist. I assume you can't see what I can see. You don't have before your eyes what I have. So I strip out all unnecessary detail and I delineate an idea with a heavy pencil and a simplified line. I'll let you fill in the spaces I deliberately leave blank with your own musings. Put the right art in front of the right people. The arts are not an appendix to society, a functionless appendage to fill with the excess after all of society's bellies are full. Artistic acts, cultural acts, or great acts as I call them, take their parentage from the physical effort of Jesus on the day of his passion through to its outcome, the resurrection and the destruction of the burden of our slavery to sin and death. The reconciliation of the indebted with the lender is called salvation. The firstborn of that marriage between physical effort and liberation is liturgy leading to sacrament. The third generation in that family is the laying down of the life of the individual into great acts, the sublimation of ordinary sweat and toil into a noble sacrifice. I'm going to say that again. Artistic acts, cultural acts, or great acts as I call them, take their parentage from the physical effort of Christ's passion through to its outcome, the resurrection and the destruction of our slavery. The firstborn of that marriage between physical effort and liberation is liturgy leading to sacrament. Third in line is the laying down of the life of the individual into great acts, the sublimation of ordinary sweat and toil into a noble sacrifice. This is culture. Culture is the overturning of debt and slavery in society. Culture, cultus, means worship. The arts, great acts, are this important. And the job to make a great act is a nuanced business. Put the right art in front of the right people. Two painful memories. One was an exhibition I put on in mainland China in 2013 for a phone tech manufacturer who was engaged in a vast real estate enterprise, a man called Pan Sutong. I can't tell you how troublesome it was to get great big paintings into Hong Kong and then over the border at that time. When he came to see them, Mr. Pan, my client, couldn't physically turn his head to look at them as he walked past. He was mute and he was angry. His daughter shielded her eyes as she walked past, like that. After that, they came and went by a different entrance. It turns out that my color combination that I used in my painting were profoundly unlucky to Mr. Pan. They had brought Mr. Pan bad luck. Whilst it was explained to me there, another clear example was given that bishops in China are advised not to wear mitres in liturgical green, because a green hat means no other thing apart from that its wearer is a cuckold. Seriously. I wish someone had told me about colour. I sold nothing. A second instance, I recall standing in front of the South Chapel of Westminster Cathedral in the spring of 2017. That's the Holy Family Chapel. If you go down the church, it's the one on the right-hand side at the back. You may know of it. You may have seen it. You may even like it. As I was standing there, thinking that it must have been a late work by the Catholic cartoonist who drew Pugwash, John Ryan, I noticed a young man, shoulder to shoulder, forehead leaning together, hugger-mugger, pointing at the icon, and obviously talking about it. So I went to ask them their opinion. They were Russian. "What is wrong?" I said. He said, "It is wrong. It is not right. It is bad." And they were more angry than I thought possible. "What's wrong again?" I said. "Joseph's arm. It is around Mary's shoulder. This means she is his woman. He is holding Jesus and Mary. This means it is his baby. It is wrong." And out they went. Oof, I thought. This is why the statue of Joseph, holding the Christ child, Joseph has the lily of sexual purity in his free hand. It's a nuanced business. There are two dominant, valid, and long-lasting, long-tested traditions in the cradle of Christianity, in Middle Eastern and the European Church. I'm going to forget the beautiful part of the Catholic world where the Apostle Thomas went. The figurative or representative image tradition and the icon tradition. The icon tradition flowed from the councils dealing with a considerable upheaval that happened in the church of the 8th and 9th centuries, called the iconoclastic controversy. If you don't know about this, I'm going to crush that delicious historical meal into a chewable lump. When the church became the official religion of the Roman Empire in 380 AD, it saw this massive boost in numbers and the insane quantity of tax revenue and funds flowing through its coffers as a sign of the fulfillment of God's promise. Very Old Testament. But then the mass of prominent Christians at that time, including the emperors of Constantinople, had Semitic heritage and Abrahamic lineage, and they still spoke the Semitic languages. 200 years of chest-thumping triumph later, and along pops Muhammad. 570 AD. Muhammad is a very interesting chap. He notices precisely the same universal human problem about him that God did and Christ resolved by his immolation, namely that man is prone to being enslaved. Muhammad solved it in a very human way. He allowed his hearers and his readers to obtain freedom by introducing a law to prohibit usury. He enacted this in his lifetime. The second associated thing that he did was introduce the word and the idea of the kafir, or in plural, kufir, meaning the person who is outside of the gang, who, under certain loose and easily abused prescriptions, benefits and wealth can be obtained anyhow without the moral oversight of God or the opprobrium of your local community. These two ideas meant that the most financially profitable place for a follower of Muhammad to be, the place where liberation from debts is most readily available, is at the territorial periphery of the idea. It has a conquesting character. So very quickly, within 100 years, Christians take a proper biffing all over Isauria, Mesopotamia, much of modern-day Turkey, in fact, Arabia, Egypt, Persia, Libya, and Spain. Also very Old Testament, our church leaders see this immediately as a sign of God's displeasure and put into action an immediate dismantling of anything that might be called an idol or a false god. Remember that, added to the Christians of ethnic Abrahamic origin, most people in possession of a Bible at this time were reading an extremely exotic text written by an obscure small tribe from far beyond the horizon of their known world, a book full of an emphatic language, strange beasts, and unfamiliar, indecipherable commands. In 720, down came anything that smacked of a golden calf, the teraphim, images, sacred pillars, high altars, and so forth. In response, for 120 years after 720 AD, the church set about defining what art is, what great acts are, and with some urgency too. After all, without great acts of art and high acts of culture, the church does not have the practical means to publicly resurrect society. After grappling with the practicalities, what emerged from the councils was not a new form of art, a superior form, but simply an extraordinary explanation of how humans perceive the invisible and the divine. One of the most significant advances in human thought in any age, anywhere on the planet, and the foundation stone of culture. Cultus, worship. Human makers of things, they said, contemplate archetypes and then make a type. In a painting, for example, they place onto a flat surface an image derived from the root form. The viewer, standing before the type, is encouraged to communicate with the archetype. The maker of the painting and the painting itself fades away, and the archetype and the viewer enter into relationship, supplication, contemplation, or worship. Very clever, very true, very beautiful, a remarkable response. The church then nuanced its patronage of made objects depending on where they were to be placed. What follows gets to the heart of how the church extracts great acts from its people. Societies that prohibit the depiction of anything material are still very common. The prohibition arises naturally among people who have a habit or a proclivity to show undue deference for the guy in the vast military hat, to see the big man as the source of all good things and blessings. Iconoclasm is adopted in societies that habitually stagnate and sink into a slough of despond or erupt in civil strife when a great overlord or master turns away the hand of patronage. Inconceivable as this might seem to the irreverent Brits, this is a real thing. It's not all bad, and it's not a bad characteristic. This instinct, distilled and purified, recognizes before anything else the great spiritual power that lies behind the cloak of the cosmos and worships it. It sees the hand of God in everything rare. I will give you another example. From 2016 to 2019, I worked in Kuwait as a guest of a lady called Lady Sheikha Sara Al-Sabah. She was the sister of the Emir of Kuwait. And her best friend was a man called Muhammad Al-Marzouk, who was the spitting image of Charlie Chaplin with a Saddam Hussein moustache. A very bright, very clever, very nuanced, very intelligent and very forceful man, a billionaire. On one occasion, he and I were walking across the sand in the middle of the desert at his stud farm, and he asked me about my family, and I said I have 7 children, which I did at that time. And he stopped in the sand, and he touched himself. I can't remember whether it was on his chest and his forehead. And he looked down, and he said in my company, "You have been touched. You have been blessed by a star from God. No, you have been blessed on the forehead by a star from God." And his reverence for me in that moment is like nothing I have received from anybody in the West. And it's, I think, where we get this idea of a lucky star on the forehead of a horse comes from. It is a wonderful gift. It is an enviable superpower to see this life as a shadow, a tissue, as a reed blowing in the wind. They are naturally profound mystics, mathematicians, ascetics, pattern makers, and astronomers. But rightly, they are very wary of anything that may be raised up as a potential idol. The church channeled this instinct with a new form of art that writes its message. Recognizably emblematic, the iconographic or written image form always contains writing. In the background is a description of the picture in the present tense, urging the viewer to enter the liturgical now, never pointing to the picture itself, always to the eternity beyond the image. Jesus being baptized is what it would say. Never, Jesus was baptized. Its forms are commonplace, never unique. The gold backgrounds are abstracted. The environment of the subject, trees, buildings, landscapes, are viewed not from a single devotee's viewpoint, but from many viewpoints, many sets of eyes at once, close to, far away, looking from above and from below. Every effort is made to avoid it triggering a fixation. Doesn't always work. There are icons in the world whose devotees unquestionably have ceased to see the archetype. As the territories of the church were reconquered in the subsequent centuries, these images were plastered everywhere like pennants or standards. They remain dominant in these regions today. Very clever, very deliberate, very nuanced. Put the right art in front of the right people. A word of caution: in putting the right art in front of the right people, public art has got to be good art. Excellent inspires devotion, said Bernini. The vast mass of artists in this time of personal truth claimed that their art would be beyond criticism if they were only properly understood. Icon writers and painters suffer from this as much as anyone else. You will hear both abstract expressionists and icon painters utter the same sentence. I claim my art is more true and more perfect than other art. Truly, a great icon is a rare, majestic thing, extremely strange and important, just like any great work of art. But a sallow-skinned, slap-headed, inexpressive, badly drawn, mean little object is no less utilitarian and domestic than a decent tin teapot. Does a job, but then what? Don't ever hold back your critical faculties in front of any artist in the modern age claiming sanctuary in a zone beyond criticism. Put the right art in front of the right people. What about us lot in the north of Europe? Slaughtering our leaders is a national pastime. Pulling down and defacing statues makes no sense to us at all because we have zero inclination to laud anyone on a plinth. Our totemic individuals are all made of wicker. The longer a thing stands tall, the more likely it is to be burnt or scythed down. We don't naturally slip into idolatry. I was in Ramsgate at Easter. In an idle moment, I looked across the channel and thought of Augustine, quaking in his slippers in Roman Gaul. How long did he stand there on the quayside listening to the horror stories of the sailors and traders coming and going from England? 3 years? He eventually arrived here carrying two things that redirected authority away from him. Smart. First was a crucifix set on a stick. Not just a cross, but a crucifix, and one raised up as a standard. The other thing was a portrait of Jesus. These weren't icons, this was the 4th century. They were portraits. It was a face of Jesus that converted the people on these islands. We can imagine what these images were like because of what we know about ourselves. We absolutely loathe a lying hypocrite, even a well-intentioned one. It is hypocrisy that makes us place the axe to the root of the tree. So these images must have portrayed an honest, direct, and believable man. And he was clearly a triumphant underdog, and we like that too. This is an aside, but it is a staggering folly that there have been almost zero memorable images of Jesus commissioned in the UK since Sutherland's Pantocrator in Coventry Cathedral, 1962. But, like iconophobes, we have another characteristic that is both strength and weakness. Our profound and natural ability is to extract remarkable things from the natural world, from soil, from stone, from wood, from ore, from water, from plants. The higher aspects of our character prompt us to enter extremely closely into the essence of materials. We have an unquenchable thirst for it. We can make materials yield remarkable and incredibly complex structures and objects. To my mind, the remarkable thing about the pharaohs is that, having set themselves up as gods, as the big man, and having access in the post-glacial era to an incredibly fertile country producing clearly in excess of food, and having access to an immeasurable quantity of very high-grade sandstone and labor, all they built was a triangle, pyramid. And to direct this tendency is an extreme necessity in the north, because this ability of ours all too easily descends into nature worship, into fear of the sky falling on our heads. No amount of education stops it. We are habitual animists and pantheists. For us, the planet herself can very swiftly become our guide, our authority, the chief member of our society. And she's just as big a tyrant, slave owner, spiller of innocent blood, and bringer of poverty as any of the wazzocks in vast military hats we confidently scoff at. The things we have made that still edify us, give us our confidence, are those we have been guided to sublimate our instinct, the chief among them being the work of the great Christian Commonwealth, the Dark Ages and the Gothic. The Merovingian, Carolingian, Romanesque, and Gothic shows the dawning understanding of how best to draw European man up and away from his lower instincts. A life and a society well directed starts and finishes great acts. Substantial, well thought through, slowly crafted, and slowly is the key, slowly crafted acts of culture are the device without equal that correctly orientates the soul of a people and their affairs away from bondage. No other device so effectively splices the common acts of the common man and woman with the sacrifice of Calvary and the concomitant reward of the resurrection, freedom from debts. Different cultures require different nuances of the same idea. I have hinted at the difficulties I experienced in China. I haven't spoken about the indigenous peoples of the Americas, nor sub-Saharan Africa, nor India, nor Oceania, or Southeast Asia. Different cultures, different nuances, different strengths, different weaknesses. Making substantial, beautifully crafted acts of culture and nuancing them in your community sounds slow and expensive. It is. It is. Overturning our debt cost Christ everything he had. Culture costs not the expenditure of the excess, but the expenditure of everything. It's in starting a great act, in carrying it out, in finishing it, in expectation of the reward that follows. The entire business plan of a vigorous church, and a saint too, is this, that the confidence of the saints is that God of this vast universe is your friend. If God is your banker, there is no requirement for a plan B. Direct yourselves, as the LMS and Joseph Shaw encourage you to do, and those in your charge to start a great act, and don't look back. Get out of the boat, let go of the side, walk on the water. Thank you.